Let's start with your fairly provocative remarks and your
Dishonesty.
fairly provocative activism, in a sense, with these legal cases. You ended with the proposition that this data is being abused. How is it being abused? How are political parties using the data that you think they shouldn't be able to collect?
Well, we don't know, but why are they doing so much to avoid that? And the kind of irony for me is the NDP is one of the complainants. They have no money, they have a comparative disadvantage, they're being clobbered electorally, they're supposed to be progressive, and yet they're a full participant in this. So you don't know what what's going on, but you can infer from their behavior that they're trying to hide something. And I don't know what they're trying to hide, but it can't be good.
Why is this so important? I understand that we would like privacy law to apply to political parties. I can understand the self-interest that would incentivize them to exempt themselves. But you seem to be putting this in a bigger governance picture.
100%.
So tell me more about the implications of that, what you're almost saying is sort of a first principle abuse here.
Yeah, well, think of it. You live in a neighborhood where the sheriff is addicted to drugs, and you're asking him to get the drug dealer out of the neighborhood. And if the drug dealer is out of the neighborhood, then his addiction is frustrated, and he's addicted. And so they're not going to govern the thing they're addicted to, because look at the work they're doing to keep it alive. And what happens, and you all know this because nobody's a better actor than you, and that when you corrupt democracy and you manipulate people, that they're not voting with their free will, of course it violates a fundamental human right that we're a signatory to, and also you don't have a shared democratic sphere where we're getting the same information that we're debating, and we may vote differently, but we come to some form of shared consensus. And so this is a precondition to address things like climate and stuff like that, because you need democratic informational consensus. So that's point number one. If you lose democracy, you lose the foundation of everything. Second of all, there is a co-conspiracy, and if you want to weaken the co-conspiracy, what's the most vulnerable actor to go after? The tech companies are pretty powerful, and they're pretty good at capturing this stuff. The security surveillance state, we're seeing their power. So I think this is the most accountable, the most vulnerable, the one with the least resources, and it's the bedrock piece. So in just a tactical, strategical way, that's why we ended up going there, and I agreed to support the complainants. I did not think it would be this expensive. You have no idea. It's 7 figures a year in legal bills, but I'm stubborn too.
You seem to be suggesting there's kind of a bargain between the tech companies and the political actors in this arrangement.
Well, they're using their stuff, so there has to be some kind of, I need this stuff, and if you shut me off from using this, then I can't give you this stuff. So that's what I mean by a co-conspiracy. And in Europe, they had a bad experience with propaganda in the 20th century. So they began in these laws by saying, we have to protect the political sphere, and children too. Those are the two zones of sensitive data under GDPR. And so they began with that, and if they didn't begin with that, I think it's a pretty good case that they wouldn't be where they are today, fighting as they are. And in my private interaction with Terry Breton, who was doing all this stuff, and he used to chair Orange, the telco, he said, I've never been lobbied like this in my life, and I've been lobbied. He was also the finance minister. So they came hard on him, but they had some kind of framing of protecting the democratic sphere, and we don't.
We opened the day talking about the suite of EU governance initiatives, and they did privacy first, right? GDPR came first.
And they had 10 years of discourse on it too, before they culminated in that.
Absolutely. But do you think that's the critical move here, that it's the linchpin you have to get right first, and then you can do the other governance pieces?
Yeah, like in Canada, we don't do discourse, we do bullying. And so I remember when C11 was first dropped, to the surprise of us all, after the Sidewalk Labs.
Say more to people in the room, the international people in the room, about what C11 was.
C11 was the first attempt at the privacy bill. Then they ran away, and after they got clobbered and tried it again on C27, got clobbered again. And civil society was critical, but the day Minister Baines launched that, to our surprise, he was standing beside the head of the Business Council of Canada saying, we both endorse this. So it was a corporate, and it was framed as a balance. I was in the first meeting with Baines and the DM when they said this is a balance between consumer rights and corporate rights. They don't see it as a human right. It's a balancing issue, not an inalienable fundamentalness. Whereas the U.S., that's why the framing of this as a human right is central, because if it's like predation in a school, like that's not allowed. That's not debargained. Well, it's good because of this and that. It's not allowed. But when you do a balance of interest, well, there's on one thing here and one thing there, then it's a corporate thing, and it misses. But that's a captured structure, and then you put all these off ramps, and the funny ADA and the funny tribunal, and I spent we did a 100-page submission on C27 with many experts, and the original C11, the spaghetti soup of, and I work in Washington very directly in the security supplemental and going through drafts, and I'm close with a lot of those folks, and I deal with them a lot. The legislation is pretty straightforward. I can read it, and you see what its intents do, and it's clear, and it's sequenced, and it's defined, and you got to make sure you get the periods right, and the commas and semicolons right. But and this stuff was an impossibility in Canada, but it's by design so that it's not effective, but it's got a veneer of effectiveness.
In part because we haven't legislated or completed legislation on privacy. We're now redoing it at a moment when AI has changed at least some of the conversation about what data can be used for and the powers it holds.
Much more powerful.
So what does it mean in a new piece of legislation, which we just heard from the minister is going to be tabled likely soon? What does it mean for that to be adapted now to a world of AI? And it's clearly not, GDPR is no longer the model here, right? It's a new moment. So what does it mean to treat data as a human right in a world of AI in privacy law?
It's much trickier, and it's much more consequential, because back in the data-driven economy where you manipulated people, this obviously created a new economic logic and birthed the data-driven economy. Now with AI, it's machine learning capital where it augments and replaces human capacity. So we should be talking much more about future of work, but it's also become a zone of geostrategic hijack to make sovereign nation states subservient to foreign control of a factor of production and a security apparatus. And also, they talk about you got to adopt AI. There are 2 million patents granted globally on AI. Canada has effectively none.
Why?
And why? Because we never responsibly paid attention for having the right to deploy it. So you always have to buy someone else's technology. And you don't get rich by buying somebody else's technology. You get rich by selling technology to other people. So the people who sell it get rich, and then if you have some new formulation that's value added, somebody owns the system or the method of that element of implementation. I guarantee anybody with any idea, it's been claimed a dozen times by behemoths, and so you try to get the bleeding edge of this, and this year was the first year that Google outfiled IBM as the largest filer in the world, and the Chinese government has about 500,000 patents in their state apparatus. So you have to rebalance that asymmetry, and a little bit of the game is somebody shows up, and it's a tough metaphor, but says, I've got 50 bullets in my gun here, and you say, oh shucks, I only have 2. And in a sense, you have to rebalance the asymmetry to maintain the ecosystem dynamism so that you can adopt it. And we don't have that, because even though we invented it, we had a maladaptive policy understanding that's rooted in an open science era of the 70s and 80s, not the enclosure area now. And then, of course, this has gone to have lots of harm spillover, so it's an economic force, and then it's a harm force, and now it's become a security force, and it's accelerated in its consequence and its cross-cutting. So we gotta get, this is very important, but you have to put it in the future of work, security, participating in the economic factor of production, and we haven't. And when you don't do that, costs go up, paychecks go down, people get hurt. And that's all a consequence of policy inattention, and it's not fair. And so this stuff is super, but you know, as you say, sometimes you have a problem, the answer is to make it bigger. You're incredibly constructive today, but you still have to make it bigger.
So that brings up sort of a slightly different topic I want to talk about. The last time we spoke in public and on the record, as they say.
You and me have been through a lot together.
Yes, we have. We have. It was 2 weeks before the election.
Yeah.
And you painted a pretty stark picture of what could be ahead for Canada.
Told you so.
Well, tell me more about that. What did you say could happen, and has it?
Well, there was a naivety that it's a global shared values of shared interest and a rising tide is all bow, and it's a rules-based international order. It hasn't been, it isn't, it's never been. But
what is it then?
Well, and what happens is in this zone, because it works on frameworks of constraint, negative rights, the intangibles, 90% of the value of the S&P 500, it creates winners and losers. Someone's the landlord, someone's the tenant. Everyone wants to be the landlord, nobody wants to be the tenant. And it's not modelable in general economic equilibrium models of trade efficiency. You can only assess it through game theory of strategic behavior. And so when you have a naive conception of what we're within, then you make yourself easy for predation because you've thought that we're all in this together. I don't have to think of resilience. I don't have to think of protecting myself because it's all a shared order. It's rules-based. It's a Barney show. And in fact, it's not. And then, of course, it's been amplified by the US administration, which I don't support at all. But it's been going on for 20 years before that, just with a veneer of a smile. And so we have to, this budget, in November 4th budget, is the most important budget of my lifetime because all the bills have come due of 30 years of elite policy failure in this country, catastrophic, and will they mark a proper reorientation? Not a word salad, but a proper reorientation that says, okay, we have to understand what this is, we have to apprehend it properly, and we have to attend to it, and that's going to require substantial reorientation.
But we were also, that was a more sophisticated way of repeating what you said to me then, which was it's not all Trump's fault, it's also ours.
No, we did this choice, we made ourselves vulnerable.
So,
I mean, there are bullies in this world, but if you make yourself vulnerable, they always prey on the weak.
Okay, so that's the point of the crisis of our sovereignty that you were pointing out at that moment, right?
And prosperity, and cost of living,
Okay.
and harms of mental health, and democratic erosion, the whole suite,
And that
comprehensive, catastrophic, multi-decade elite policy failure, unambiguously.
how do you really feel?
Well, the problem is
I'm trying to judge, I'm trying to gauge this and
look,
decode you.
If we word salad it, it's just going to get worse because it's getting worse fast. So we have to, it's not, as Keynes famously said, it's not new thinking we need, it's escaping old thinking is the hard thing. So I have to, this is not, I mean, kids running into the road with cars coming on, you scream to say, you're going to get hit, like, stop. And so, for me, I mean, I've had enough because I've seen the harms, and I've seen, we could go on all day on the shimmying, and, we're regulatory, go read USMCA. I mean, who's read the million words of it? It's regulatory remote control everywhere. There's no the words free trade are not in the million words of it. They call it modernizing, but that's gaslighting. It's this thing's govern or be governed. And in all aspects, you should see how much they cover. They govern our health policy, our e-commerce stuff, our IP stuff, our who we can do trade, our standards, our procurement, our macroeconomic policies. That's a subset. Our data policies, our IP policies. Yeah.
So perhaps more than any other Canadian, you've been talking about digital sovereignty for a long time.
Yeah.
What does it mean now? What would true digital sovereignty look like for Canada or for the EU, who's also looking for it, or any other nation that is thinking we need to shore up our own digital infrastructure to ensure we have sovereign control over our society?
Well, what it isn't is autarky, and you get these chirpers from the right who say we can't be North Korea. So they make it a false dichotomy of, either free markets or North Korea. It's a whole lot of things. It's very technical, so we need to invest in capacity building, which this is about and you're about. We need to be front-footed and genuinely oriented to the citizenry, not corporate interests, not captured interests. And it's cost-cutting. I've mentioned USMCA, I've mentioned privacy, I've mentioned, it goes to research funding, we don't have any sovereign compute, it's 2025, soon 2026. I can go down the line, and so this stuff needs adult hour. And I mean, I could go, you should see how sophisticated other states are in these forms. I mean, the US has been very geostrategic. I could give you a dozen very strategic behaviors by the US in this digital realm just this year. But some examples, the Genius Act for tokenization and sovereign wallets, the AI white paper, the IEPA weaponization, and the IP margin rights under Bayh-Dole. All are a coherent framework to project in these frameworks that are digital and intangible. Not one drop of that's kinetic, not one drop of that's physical. But where has that been in our technocracy of public policy? Where has that been in our discourse? It's all about atomized jobs and branch plants of foreign companies, and let's get a job, even though it's a smaller number, lower value, and no strategic control. And here we are. So yeah, it's time to wake up. Yeah.
How should we look at our AI how should a country look at an AI strategy as part of that? Is it a new thing, or is it a continuation of the very same principles of data privacy, IP protection, sovereign infrastructure? Is it all just part of that same package?
Yeah.
Or is it something new?
I don't subscribe to these global things and all that. They're not shared norms on this stuff. It's not a cooperative system. There are security allies, but there are no economic allies in a rentier system anymore. So everyone's just looking at each other to figure out how they're going to game. But for me, it's very clear what Canada has to do. We have to build capacity. This is a very technocratic realm, and we have to have front-footed national approaches. So AI fits as a factor of production. How do we maintain those lakes that are proprietary and have public good in them and protect from the hijacking, but also can be used as factors of production and in lots of different ways, government services, companies, research and all that stuff. How does that fit in? It doesn't mean we have to use a certain LLM or a certain chip, but we have to say that the engine is ours. And then we have to have the IP to know we do it, and we have to orient to our firms, not so that the wealth effects and the control effects and the good jobs and all that and the security effects accrue to us. And none of those frameworks have been in place in the thinking structure of neoliberalism over the past 30 years. So that's the reorientation that we need. Yeah.
Last thing I want to ask about is you've been a part of the Canadian tech world, a core person in the Canadian tech world for 30 years.
35. Jeez.
I didn't want to presume.
I wake up every morning feeling like a 35-year-old upstart. You know, like those dogs that bark and
blood transfusions?
I think like that. Like I got to work hard every day.
All right.
I got to hold my place.
Always
I
hustling.
don't think that way. So just
okay.
stop that.
Then we won't go down that path. But when I look at, when you listen to much of the Canadian tech world, and I think this is the case in many countries at the moment, there is still a sort of an ideology or a belief about government that seems to come from Silicon Valley. How do you, it is very anti-governance, very anti-regulation, very anti a lot of the policies that you promote while also wanting to see the Canadian tech sector scale. What do you say to them to make them, to convince them that actually good governance in Canada is part of growing the Canadian tech sector?
Well, I'm the chair and founder of the Council of Canadian Innovators, and we've got 180 members in that. Many of them are very big companies. I've never heard it.
Really?
No.
So this is a feature of the algorithm that we're hearing this.
It could
as
be
a
a
dominant
couple
voice.
actors maybe trying to audition to be honorary Silicon Valley Americans, and it's a self-esteem issue they're grappling with. But
Do you want to name these people?
No, not. It's not
Should
personal.
we guess? We can
It's
have
not personal.
call-outs from the.
It's not personal. It's. I was at that first meeting where the minister and the deputy minister saying we have to balance between innovation and privacy, and I'm like, excuse me, these reinforce one another. They're not a trade-off. Clear rules, public good, and all of this stuff. And the truth of it is, when this also has monopolistic structures, scale, scope, information asymmetries, network effects, right? So if you actually have reasonable governance in it, it rebalances the monopolistic Hoover. And again, when you look at Silicon Valley, and you had Luther, right, talking about little tech and why come here. This is an issue in America, not because they love Canada, but they're saying, why does that all have to go to 3 or 4 companies in its structural aspect? So they're calling for competition stuff and public good type stuff and that. So no, I think that's not a cool representation for people in the game to give. But I appreciate some people like to play that, but I don't know of any particular voices that do that. You hear bits over here and there now and then certain of the right will jump on it, like, it's free markets. But these are negative rights that are constructed by the government and changes 100 times a day, hundreds of times a day, by lobbied interests. There's no free in this. It's a social construct. And so, you've got to you got to jettison that orthodoxy that's put us in this spot. We can fix it, but we have to upper capacity, be front-footed, and that's a reorientation. And I'm praying on the budget that I can praise the living lights out of it. I would love to say, best budget of my lifetime, represents a reorientation. This is leadership at its best. I'm the first to praise good behavior.
We'll wait and see. Well, just to close, one last question. I mean, Frank McCourt left us with the proposition that we have a narrow window of time right now to both build new democratic tech and govern that transition democratically. What's at stake to you if we don't capture that
it
window?
can't tip too far. I'm an optimist. I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm always optimistic. And
like the minister.
Yeah, and like Mark from Mozilla was talking about. If I was doing a graduate work with you right now, I would want to work on those open source options. What's the public good? What's the public policy? Because part of the problem is when you're playing whack-a-mole with a wet noodle with trillion-dollar companies, you spend all your time saying bad, 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 and then that mole's done, and then another one comes up. So you have to begin to provide the alternative that people can migrate to. And I think if you do that, all kinds of other dynamics that are constructive will begin to kick into gear. So yeah, what Frank did, and he's saying it's not the only thing, but it's one, and the Mozilla guys have been constructive, and they talk about all this open source for ad exchanges in Europe and EU and UK and stuff like that. So, and I'm not as up to date as they are, but I bet you there's a buffet of things there that you could harness with public policy and entrepreneurial thing and good research to say, I can start to provide the better, not just stop the bad.
Provide the better, start the better, not just stop the bad.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
All right. That's something to close on. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate
Good
it.
job. Thanks.